Hello everyone, I'm Sumin Han, and today I'm gonna present on the topic Inner Speech, a cognitive bridge to L2 text internalization. Before we begin, I'd like to give you a few moments to read the passage from The Great Gatsby silently to yourselves. Okay, let me ask you. While you were reading these lines with your eyes, did you hear a voice or sound in your head? Even though you didn't speak out loud, that experience of reciting the sentences in your mind, that is exactly what we are talking about today. What you just experienced is inner speech. According to Guerrero, inner speech is any language that occurs in the mind and is not spoken aloud. This includes sounds, words, phrases, sentences, and even full-blown conversations or dialogues held entirely within your mind in English. Inner speech is understood through two main perspectives. From a cognitive perspective, it's seen as the essential mechanism for the phonological loop, a memory process where we hear sounds and mentally rehearse words. From a sociocultural perspective, as Vygotsky put it is a living process where thought is born through words. Expanding on Vygotsky's ideas, Fernhoff proposed a four-level model extension. It begins with external dialogue, moves to private speech, then expands into internal discourse, and finally reaches its most refined form, condensed inner speech. Guerrero also outlined 4 stages of second language internalization. The pre-intellectual stage, where there is no fusion of thought and second language. Private speech, where self-directed talk forms an internal mental plane. Early inner speech, where mediation from the first language begins to decrease. The intellectual stage, where the learner can finally perform sustained intellectual activities directly in the second language. Now, I'd like to introduce a specific study that investigated the relationship between this inner speech and reading comprehension. Speed reading training typically teaches that reducing this inner voice increases reading speed, but it remains unclear whether this process plays a positive or negative role in language internalization for foreign language learners. This study analyzed the initial stages of text internalization among foreign language learners participating in speed reading programs and clarified how internal language is used in that process. Participants were EFL learners who enrolled in a speed reading program. Data was collected with qualitative research utilizing journals written by learners and the recall technique measuring how much of the read material is remembered. This study followed 15 university students in Colombia over 2 semesters. All participants were at an A1 proficiency level in English. They performed speed reading activities using 300-word passages twice a week. The researcher used journals and recall techniques to capture what was happening in their minds during these exercises. During the study, researchers asked participants the following specific question. Could you please monitor in the following speed reading activity if you translate in your mind what you know and self-vocalize what you do not know as you claim happened with this reading? Based on their responses, the functions of inner speech were categorized into 4 areas as shown in the diagram. Text comprehension was the most dominant at 60%. Internal language reproduction accounted for 3.5%. Association with mental images were 7.5%. Self-regulation during reading was 2%. According to the study, text internalization progresses through 5 stages. The key takeaway here is that self-vocalization is the most fundamental and universal phenomenon that every learner experiences. However, as a learner becomes more proficient, these initial stages become condensed. For a beginner, the stages of vocalizing and translating are long. But for a proficient learner, these stages happen so rapidly and automatically that they seem to disappear. But in reality, they are simply compressed, serving as the necessary foundation to reach the final stage, mental imagery. In summary, internalization evolves from a pre-intellectual phase to an intellectual one. At lower levels, self-vocalization and translation dominate. As proficiency grows, translation becomes automated in the early inner speech phase, leading finally to the intellectual stage where one thinks and visualizes directly in the second language. The higher the proficiency, the more condensed the inner speech becomes. To conclude, I'd like to summarize what inner speech is. It is not an obstacle to speed reading. Instead, it is the transparent foundation that sustains the cognitive activity of reading. Its form changes depending on the reader's level, but it remains the essential bridge we must all cross to reach the true meaning of a text. When learners successfully cross this bridge of inner speech and reach the destination of mental imagery, true reading enjoyment will begin. Thank you for listening.